Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent, also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois.
This week in the news, another problem with shifting education online. An article by Derek Newton in the Hechinger Report. Mark and Anika will discuss, what do you need to know about your financial aid officer? Our bonus content will be Mark discussing how colleges use waitlists. And our interview will be the final part with William Segura, the Associate Dean at Emory University, on Understanding Emory. And there will be no college spotlight because we'll be discussing Emory.
Well, Dave, history was made. History was made. And I know
we are dead. We don't want to get too political here, but somebody won.
Yeah. And so, I know this may offend people who don't have some of the politics that we have, but several things happened there. Both Dave and I being people of color. I mean, to see the first woman and the first African-American with Indian descent, international descent, like what that did for our daughters.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My daughter was in tears saying, I can believe in America again.
Right.
And honestly, Joe Biden, Dr. Biden, a lifelong educator, I'm really excited about that focus and what that's going to mean for higher education with the priority put there. So, we're kind of excited right now, and I think some good times may be ahead. And sorry if that offends your politics, but we're going to enjoy this right now.
Well, Mark, we have family in Canada. I have family in Europe.
You're going to get Canada in every podcast, man.
Well, that's right. That's right. Friends in Europe. I have friends in Australia. And so many people texted and emailed and called because the world was literally on tenterhooks to see whether, and I'm not understating, our democracy was going to survive. I believe we really pulled back from the edge here, and I'm just so relieved.
Yeah, no, democracy was on the ballot. I mean, the current president had threatened that he wanted to jail Clinton, jail Obama, and jail Biden.
Yep.
And he already said he'd fire the FBI agent and, go put whoever he needed to put in there to make that happen. And so we were quickly moving toward our authoritarian regime. And
it's nice to know we are rejoining the world community. In short order, we will be rejoining the World Health Organization. We will be taking part again in the Paris Climate Accords. We are going to be strengthening our ties with our NATO allies. And we're going to be looking towards new relationships in the trade agreements with China and the East. So,
well, and don't forget about DACA, Dave.
And DACA, absolutely.
And that relates to kids, and that relates to education.
Absolutely.
Immediately restoring DACA.
Yeah.
And not threatening to ship out a number of people that didn't come here on their own. And so from a higher education standpoint, I will say this, all of higher education is rejoicing right now. Almost all of higher education. And so I'm in a good mood, and I'm here in Cary, North Carolina. I'm in a hotel trying to capture history and trying to do podcast recording. So it's good. It's exciting.
Awesome.
Now for my admissions tip, I'm going to start to share a few different tips that relate to college admission essays. So a very common essay that colleges ask is, how would you add diversity to our community? And so for those who are listening, who are parents of 10th graders or 11th graders, you want to get a start on an essay that you're most likely going to have to write. That's a good one to practice. I would try to say make it 250 words. That's about the average length. And start thinking about that, because there's a good chance that you'll be asked that question. I see that over and over and over again. And I'll be sharing some other common essays like that in future weeks. So the tip is practice that essay in advance, because there's a good chance you're going to have to answer it. You ready for admission vernacular, Dave?
I'm ready, my friend.
AAPI. What's AAPI?
AAPI. AAPI. Okay, let me see.
Now, this is one admissions officers use a fair amount because it's an acronym, and to say the whole thing is just a mouthful. So they just say AAPI.
Okay, academic assisted program.
You may as well stop right now because you're dead. I'm going to give you the answer, man. This is going to be one. I know Dave enough. This is going to produce a collective groan. I should have got it.
Oh, man. Look at
Asian American Pacific Islander.
Oh, man.
That's a common term when they're talking about different demographics they're recruiting. So you've got,
my best friend is an AAPI.
Sounds like that. What's that? AARP or something like that.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, it was something with adult learning.
Yes, no. Asian American Pacific Islander. That's all right. We'll start a new streak next week. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news. All right, Dave, we got a Hechinger article, second week in a row, part of a trifecta. So we're doing 3-state, and that means Dave and I had to do our homework and do some reading because they're not one-pagers.
Yeah, they aren't one-pagers. And when you do a Hechinger report, you really sort of have to read it again, and divide it into sections to figure out how you're going to discuss it. So we're going to do that with this one. It's a very fascinating one. And it's another problem with shifting education online, cheating, by David Kirp. And basically what he says is that before COVID, an organization called ProctorU, which actually proctors online testing, caught people cheating less than 1% of the time, but they were only proctoring 340,000 exams. But after COVID, the number of exams increased to 1.3 million, and their incident of cheating rose to 8%. So, Mark, what I'd like to do is discuss, first of all, the scope of the cheating, number one. Number two, the types of cheating that's going on. Number three, discuss some of the reasons why students cheat, and then discuss the ramifications of that cheating. Sounds good?
Hey, you're deep on me, all those captions. Well, let's start with the scope. So the scope is much, much greater than that 8%. Like, yeah, that's significant. You were catching 1% and now you're catching 8%. So that's an 8-fold increase. But the article goes on to talk about they know it's so much more widespread than that. Here's a quote. The article features a couple schools, one being North Carolina State, another being Purdue, and their attempts to clamp down on this cheating. Yeah, so it says Purdue asked Chegg to remove their exam materials and asked for help identifying cheaters. And then it says they found a massive number of students who were using Chegg to get test answers.
Right.
In one class, Coast Grill said as many of 60 out of the 250 had done it.
Right.
And 100 students in a colleague's class were identified as having used Chegg in a similar fashion. And then it goes on to say that surveys show that when teachers are asked how many people cheat, they give a certain number. But when they ask students think it happens way more, which means they think they're probably overlooking and missing a lot of it. And here's a quote. It says, I had a conversation with a group of students several months ago, said James Pitaresi. Sorry, James, if I butchered your name. Vice Provost at Binghamton University. And one of the students said, look, probably 80% of the class is using Chegg. What are you going to do? Expel all of us? So there's a sense, Dave, on the extent of it. It's pretty bad.
Now, Mark, did we explain to the listeners what Chegg is and how it operates?
No, we should do that. Do you want to do that?
Okay, so yeah, I found it fascinating, man. So Chegg is as a subscription service. You pay $9.95 a month, and the idea is that it give you fast answers to homework and test questions. It also runs by a model where students submit all the tests that they've taken. So Chegg develops this database of tests and answers from a wide variety of courses and studies. And get this, Mark, they made $153 million in gross revenue the second quarter of this year, up 63% from
I don't know if you remember this, Dave, but I told you, buy Chegg stock about 9 months ago.
Did. Yes, you did.
Yes.
Right.
I own Chegg stock because I know, like, they used to be textbook company, then online textbook, and now they've got this tutoring service, and it's just it's so suited for online learning. And I mean, it's going to survive whether, online or not online, but it's just booming right now at that price point.
And get this, it's math problems, it's called Snap a Pic, Get an Answer. You literally snap a picture, and within seconds, it will give you the answer to the math problem broken down by steps, like the whole thing, not just like the number, but it's like E equals MC squared, and here's all the showing.
Showing the work.
So literally these kids can go into an exam, see a question, take a picture of it, download it to Chegg, and get the full answer within seconds. I mean, it's amazing.
I know. I know. So do we want to move to the other parts of your outline? Because there's a lot of places I want to go there, and I want to try to follow your outline, or unless we just have a conversation about it.
So we were talking about the extent of the cheating, and we already talked about the fact that I think you said 93% of instructors think students are more likely to cheat online than in person. So let's talk about the types of cheating. So we already talked about Chegg, and then there's also video conferencing and sharing answers. So the idea is that the kids are in a session. I think they had this problem with the SATs or the AP exams, and they can video conference among themselves and actually share the answers. Do you want to talk about some other types of cheating Mark?
No, I mean, I think that's good enough to cover that.
Right, and private messaging apps. So the third part I thought about was they talked about why do the students cheat? And they illustrated what happened at NC State, where in a particular statistics test, NC State found that 200 out of 800 of the students cheated. And when they actually brought them up for disciplinary review, the students said that, first of all, the majority of them didn't think or feel or know that using an application like Chegg was cheating, because they said it's so widely available. Why wouldn't we use it? And they also said that there was a lot of personal stresses, because if you know that your classmates are using Chegg and you are not, how are you possibly going to keep up with the curve?
Yeah, and in that case, what you're talking about specifically there, the professor actually even admitted, like, I feel bad for these kids. Right. Because we do grade on a curve, and we're trying to enforce integrity, but if most of the class is doing it, it's a lot of pressure on students to be the minority that goes by the rules.
That's right. And the article wrapped up by talking about what are the ramifications of cheating, and they said for an individual student, of course, there's the ethical issue. Are you going to do the right thing even when your colleagues are not? But on a macro level, they didn't give this example, but I thought about doping and cycling. If you have rampant cheating, then grades become irrelevant. It diminishes grades. It diminishes the markers of success, because are you truly preparing the students for the industry that they're studying for?
Yeah, and I think one of the real concerns is the slippery slope.
Right.
Like, once you go down that path, your conscience gets a little hardened, and then you go one step further and one step further and one step further, and next thing you know, who knows what you end up doing.
Right.
But it's a tough sell, because when the majority of peers are doing something, it really diminishes the infraction in the minds of students.
It does.
It just does. It's like, well, everybody's doing it, and I'm at a disadvantage if I don't.
Yeah.
And so, the moral argument is important, and I will stand by that. Yeah. And I think it's very important, but it's not the easiest thing to convince students of, one, the harm in doing it, because let's face it, majority of the time they don't catch people.
That's correct.
You know, the article talked about ProctorU, a company that's designed to catch this stuff, and they're studying the videos and catching. In one case, they caught this one guy 7th different time he's taken the test and doing it for people all around the world. But most of the time, you're not caught.
And that gentleman was based in Qatar.
Correct.
So there had no legal ramifications on him. They couldn't catch him. And many a times people were using aliases or different emails, so they couldn't even track down who he was helping.
Yeah, and the article also talks about this whole subculture out there, where, like, it uses an example of the website Reddit, and it talks about how it gives students tips to avoid not getting caught.
That's right. That's right.
For example, here's a quote from the article, Dave. It says, message boards at Reddit are filled with warnings to students not to use their school email address or their real names when signing up for Chegg or similar services. That makes catching cheaters nearly impossible.
Yep.
And then it says, even when professors try to preempt Chegg and other sites ahead of time, as one did, check this out, by embedding a trackable code into the test questions.
Yeah.
Look what it says. Students figured it out and worked around the code, according to faculty familiar. So, man, it's just tough on the enforcement side.
It is. And, you know, the article went on to say that only 1/3 of colleges are using any type of proctoring to try and track down cheaters. And the reason is, number one, it's expensive, you know. And then number two, even when the colleges tried, they actually tried to do scale down security, such as software or where they can lock the student out of a web browser. But the students were way ahead in their level of sophistication to get around those safeguards.
Yeah, and here's another quote from the article. Yeah. It says, for most faculty, their only recourse is to ask the companies like Chegg to remove their exam materials and to identify cheaters. It says, but that can take days or even weeks and happens after the material has already been shared and the exam is over. It says, it goes on to say, it puts the burden on professors to go site by site, search for their own material and ask for it to be taken down. And there's one professor that it highlights a lot. He did that. So it says, I go through every couple of months and I write to them and I say, please take down these 200 or these 300 items off your site, said Cosgrove. Then he says, but that takes a lot of time, especially when students are getting answers in 10 minutes.
Yeah. So, Mark, to wrap this up, what is the solution here? This article posed the problem, the dilemma, but it certainly didn't provide any real long-term solutions. It was more of sort of outlining the situation we have now and the growing problem with a big question mark.
I mean, I approach things a certain kind of way, Dave, from my worldview. I believe in God, and I believe you do the right thing and God takes care of you.
Yeah.
So that's how I speak to my children, and I say they're like, it's so heavy a price to have a guilty conscience and to carry that weight around and to go to bed, at night and know that you cheated. It's not worth it. So I speak from that perspective, and I speak from the standpoint of, like, do the right thing and God will honor that. But this is with my own kids, how I approach it. I mean, not everybody has similar value set on that kind of thing. But there's a reason why there's that saying, like, reputation is what people think you are, but character is like what you do in the dark.
Right.
And so I approach it from a slippery slope standpoint as well. Like, once you start doing this, conscience gets inured, and the next thing you know, you cheat on your taxes, and then, the next thing you know, you're shoplifting, and the next thing you know, you're arrested.
That's right.
But I have to admit it's a tough sell. But I mean, that's all that I can say is there's the price of having a clean conscience is, let me say this, Dave. When I was in theological school, I had to take Greek and Hebrew. Okay. And it was a very, very rigorous school in Dallas, Texas. And I'm not a language student. It's not knowing my natural aptitudes in my mind work. So I found it very, very, very hard, especially Hebrew. And I remember one time, like, I was so tempted to cheat because I was going to this really, really hard exam. And I just felt like I cannot fail this thing. And I'm so glad that I resisted that because, my conscience is clear. I made it through that program. I never cheated. I never cheated one time in school. And I'm glad for elementary, middle, or high, or college or grad school. And there's a certain just satisfaction of having a really, really, really clear conscience. And that's all that I don't know what else to say other than to reaffirm the value of a clear conscience, to reaffirm that people often reap what they sow, and to talk about the slippery slope and hope that appeals to somebody's sense of morality. Do you have anything else to add?
Well, I always feel that you can't fake competency, that ultimately, if you're going to be successful in anything, you have to master the material. And if you cheat, you will not, and it will catch up to you. So maybe you are able to get through a high school exam, but eventually you're going to need that material for college. Or maybe you think you can get through one or two courses in your college, but eventually it's going to catch up to you because you're not going to have mastered the material for the GMATs or the MCAT. So when you get an eventual job and they find out that you're not quite as sharp as you portrayed yourself to be. In life, education is about learning and mastering the material, and you can't cheat your way to competency. So ultimately, you are truly just hurting yourself. You may get short-term gains, but by advancing to the next level without truly being qualified, it will catch up to you.
There you go. Basically, what you're saying is you may think you're cheating the test, but in actuality, you're cheating yourself.
And I think that's a great wrap.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, Anika, I'm going to start out with a quiz for you today. It is episode 146 with us, and it's the first time this thing has ever happened. What is it?
This thing that's ever happened to us this morning trying to record?
Yes, us this morning trying to record.
I'm like, we've done this over and over again. I don't know.
No guesses?
I give up. What's the first?
I'm in North Carolina and you're in North Carolina.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So close yet so far away.
Yeah, well, we're not as far as you think. So I was driving by, and I'm driving by the freeway. It's 11:30 at night. And I'm seeing signs for Greensboro and Elon. And I'm like, I need to just pull off the highway and knock on Anika's door. But I don't think you or Jay or anybody would like that at 11:30 at night.
Oh, you wouldn't have got an answer. I promise you that.
So I just kept sailing on to So I'm recording from Cary, North Carolina in my hotel. And I learned, I saw another side of North Carolina that you know about, but I'm seeing for the first time. The rural side.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm in Cary, which is, I'm a metropolitan, but Joy's car is being fixed by one of those rural mechanics. So he works, he does the mechanic thing in the day at the Prius dealership. Then he has his own little side hustle out in the outskirts, the hinterlands outside of Sanford. It's connected to Sanford, but it's like the boonies of Sanford, where everybody has like 250 acres and their own cattle and farms and chickens and everything.
Welcome.
You know that world, don't you?
Welcome.
So anyway, it's nice to be in the big NC. All right, Anika, we are in chapter 146, as I already said, and we're looking at the financial aid officer today. And the financial aid officer, the FAO. And you've read the chapter. What were some of your takeaways?
It was pretty much the emphasis on the importance of this person, this FAO, financial aid officer, for a couple, I guess, key reasons that you mentioned in the chapter is that, these times when these kids are in school and things get confusing, when it comes to the finances. So you want to have a person or I guess like a confidant or a friend almost to help you through those times. And another one that you mentioned is when you need more funding, like you need some support around that area. People can help, these folks can help you identify resources that you may not otherwise find. And it's all about relationships. So that was the big biggie takeaway for me for this chapter.
Yeah, I mean, that's really it. I mean, here's what I like to say to students. You know what, students? You don't have to worry about being lonely in college because you can go meet your new best friend. I'm talking about the financial aid officer. Now, of course, if you're not getting financial aid, this won't apply to you, but we're in the money section of the book. So we're talking about money every time, when we get to this part of the book. And the majority of people do need financial aid. And if you need financial aid, that means somebody's on the other side giving you that aid and answering your questions. And there's just a lot of myths about the financial aid officers. A couple of them are they are going to squeeze every single penny out of you. So be extremely careful about anything that you tell them because they work for the institution. They don't work for you, and they're squeeze every penny out of you. And it's not necessarily true. Like they go into this because they love people and they want to help people. Another myth is they're just some corporate bureaucrat with no Valentine. I'm talking about no heart, no Valentine. some corporate bureaucrat there, it's just, no, like I've found them to be some of the nicest people, some of the most down-home people. And you want to get to know them because they know a lot of things about the money that you don't know. Like you said, you can have confusing questions that you need answers to. One of the things I like to do when I sit down with financial aid officers is, and this is maybe me being a little nerdy geeky, but Anika, when you see a printout of a school, they'll give you the breakdown of all their expenses. Mm-hmm. You'll see it on a website or any cost of attendance. Right. And you'll see a transportation number and you'll see a personal miscellaneous number and books and supplies. So I like to ask them, like, how do you come up with that number? How did you derive that number? And, that's maybe me on the more, I'm sure I'm not telling them, I'm sure some 18-year-old couldn't care less about that. Just dad, mom, give me the money, Right. But one of the things that they often know is where sources of money are that students don't know about, right? So at a minimum, they're going to talk about where scholarships are posted internally. Is it like an internal job board, a section of a website? They can know a lot about work opportunities. That can be important. Another thing that's extremely important is, do you remember us talking about professional judgment before, Anika?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You remember how that applies to money?
Kind of, sort of, but go ahead and let us know.
No, go ahead and tell me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I don't know. You just have to, I don't know, actually.
See, you were trying to get over on me. Bust it. You fake better than Dave, though.
I feel like I know as soon as you say it, I'm going to say, yeah, that was it. I was just about to say that.
Yeah. So professional judgment has to do with, there's a lot of things when it comes to financial aid that are not black and white. There are a lot of things where there's some discretion involved. Mm-hmm. So let me give you an example. Now, this is something that relates to a college or wealthier colleges that accept the CSS profile. One of the things that they automatically do is they automatically build into their EFC a figure that's based on summer work expectation on the part of the student. You don't know that. You don't see that. You just, whether you do a net price calculator or you look at a published list of cost of attendance, you just see something that says EFC there. Okay. And I've said before, EFC is a summation of the income and the assets of the student and the parents. So you just see that, right? You don't know. Okay. You figure, okay, they're looking at my income, maybe some W-2s, looking at assets, and they're coming up with this number. Well, one of the things that's also built into there for CSS profile schools is a summer earnings expectation for the student. And they set it as a flat amount. Like they don't say, okay, Roger, you look good for $1,800. Jenny, we think you can do $2,500. It's just a set amount that it's kind of across the board. Whatever they come up with, they think students should be contributing to their education, and we think they should make X amount, whatever they come up with, and that's the amount they should be contributing to education. So let's say you had a situation where, let's say because of COVID, you were unable to work, couldn't find work. So you can appeal that. You can say, I know you have a summer earnings expectation. By the way, that's usually not published. It's not usually something that's published, the amount. But if you ask a financial aid officer about it, they'll tell you and say, I just was unable to work. I just wasn't. I looked. So professional judgment means they have the ability to waive that and say, okay, we had $2,000 built in for you for the summer. You presented a real plausible case why you were unable to do that. If it's a school that meets full demonstrated need, then they can turn around and replace that $2,000 summer work expectation with an increase of $2,000 in your grant. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does.
There's also all kinds of different special circumstances that can occur. Things like dental expenses, medical expenses, change in job status, even other things like one student I worked with had extensive legal, the parent had extensive legal bills because of a divorce. And because of a relationship with the financial aid officer says, you know what? We are going to increase our grant for you because of this additional expense. All those things fall in the area of professional judgment. Okay. And that means it's completely up to the discretion of the financial aid officer whether or not they do it or not for you, or how hard they work.
Got a little power then.
Yeah. And, and I didn't give a corny illustration last week. That means I'm due for one this week. Mark. Oh, Lord. I was thinking. Sorry.
But go ahead.
Okay. So this is not as much of, this is like a true story, actually. So I have this place where I buy all my cars from, almost all my cars when I get them. And we have 4 people, the drivers in the family, that's 4 cars right there. And then, did I ever say on the air that we had a year where all 4 of us had an at-fault accident? And
God.
3 cars were totaled in 1 year. 1 by Joy, 1 by Karis, 1 by me. And Anitra also had an at-fault accident.
Oh, my goodness. No, I thought we were bad, Mark. No.
Oh, no. You don't want to do that.
Ooh-wee.
Okay? Because when you do it,
that insurance.
Your insurance company drops you.
Oh, whoa. Wow.
So I was paying $5,200 a year for insurance. And then I got a notice. Your insurance company has not renewed you. I'm like, this does not look good. So, by the way, this isn't the illustration. This is the side story. It's going to relate to the illustration. So then I had to go fight for, find another company. And they wanted $13,200 in for the year instead of $5,400. And the only way I could get them down was by paying the whole year up front and a $2,000 deductible. And it still was $10,400. And I had to just give them $10,400 right away. So that was kind of bad. But anyway, we get all of our cars from this one place. And I've got my brother on this place now, too. So he flies in from Denver. He's bought 2 cars here for his kids. So I'm talking to Mike, who's been there for 26 years. He's a sales rep, right? And a great guy. He's just paid a salary. He doesn't get paid commission. And this is not one of these high-end places. Like, they have high-end cars, but it doesn't come with like all the huge warranty and all that. And so I'm talking to him and he's like, look, every 1 out of every 100 cars, we have a lemon. Like, it happens. Like, these are pre-owned cars, right? And so I know we don't have much of a warranty, but if you get a lemon from us and you come back and you tell me, look, we don't advertise this, but I'm going to replace it for you, But then he says, but if you come at me right away and you're screaming and you're yelling at me, and he's like, bump that. You're on your own, dude. And that's my illustration. Like, if you treat your financial aid officer like they're in an adversarial way or in a demeaning way or in a belittling way or criticizing way, like, you guys are always trying to rip me off. I know, why is this, or why is this that, and why is this that, and why are you charging me so much? If you come at them with anger or with hostility or with agitation, then that's not going to work out good for you. You're going to be like Mike. He's going to be, bump that. You're on your own. But if you come at me with kindness, and this is a life lesson, right? So how was that one? Was that like a 1 out of 10, a 2?
Actually, that was pretty not corny, Mark. I'm impressed. That was pretty good.
That one was okay. I live another day.
Here's the question,
yes,
Mark.
I survived to give one more. Go ahead.
How do you find this person? Like, you just
this
don't
my
walk
car
into the
person?
No,
which one? Am I
going back?
My backroom mechanic that's working on another car here in North Carolina? Which person?
Reeling it back into the FAO, to the financial aid person.
Oh, you know what? This is a really good question. I'm glad you brought this up. So
yeah, how do you, like, you don't just walk in and say you.
No. So it's different in different schools, right? So a lot of colleges do what a lot of high schools do. And what a lot of high school guidance counselors do, which is they assign you based on the alphabet They do one of those, A through G gets U and G through L gets you. They do that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, a lot of schools do it that way. And then other schools don't personally assign you somebody, but you can come in and talk to anybody. And sometimes when they assign you somebody, that's something that they will proactively communicate to you.
Okay.
Either in your portal or through email. And so you just have to know for your school whether they've personally assigned you somebody or you just sort of come in and talk to anybody available.
Okay, well let's talk about the scenario where you don't get assigned someone. Because I think about if you were in a larger institution and, just like, we talk about the counselor to student ratio, it's off the charts. You don't want to overwhelm that person. But how do you present your case? Like, I need you to be my BFF. Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So even when they don't assign you, it's their job to be available for anybody who reaches out. Like, that's their job. And quite honestly, they like to get to know students. Like, I encourage you to, as a student, to get in and let them know your major, a little bit about your background. I mean, you can't just do a little 4-hour little mid tea with them in the middle of the day. But or you bring the crackers and the cheese and the wine. It's not going to be like that. But they're people and they go into this work because they like people. And so the more that you let them know a little bit about your life, it really establishes a relationship. And that's kind of the ideal way. Is it's actually kind of a relationship. It's not just you're the financial person. Mm-hmm. So you won't have any problem getting access, whether you're assigned or not, or you can walk in if you're on campus, or you can call, if you're remote or even if you're not. Either way,
okay,
you'll get somebody. But I prefer personally, if you're on campus, I really, really prefer sort of going in and meeting them because I think it takes the relationship to a different level than just a phone call relationship.
Right. And we have to assume that everyone is on the level playing field in terms of experience and knowledge. Like, if I don't want to end up with the person who just graduated yesterday and is just new to the field. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like any job, the person that's been doing it for 35 years knows more than the person that's been doing it for 3 months. Mm-hmm. But a lot of jobs, they know so much more than you that you probably won't even know they don't know that much because their knowledge is good. Yeah, because it's actually a pretty high responsibility they have because if a student is actually Pell Grant eligible, FAOs are empowered by the federal government because remember, Pell Grant comes from the federal government.
Right.
They're empowered to look at a student situation and let's say a student is not getting Pell. And they're able to look, they're empowered to be able to make a professional judgment decision and say, you know what? I'm adjusting it because your mom lost her job. That means we're going to decrease the income. I'm looking at these health expenses you have. I'm going to add this in here. And so now you qualify for Pell. So they basically get to give the federal government's money away and it's a trust relationship and it's not really questioned. So, it's a lot of training and a lot of responsibility.
Okay.
So there you go. Your new BFF. No reason to be lonely anymore.
That's right. Go get them.
Go get them. And remember, they're there to help you. They're there to serve you. And so treat them with kindness and you'll get kindness back. Don't come at like, you may not get a car. You might not get a car. Your car fixed.
So messed up, but okay.
Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com.
Okay, Mark, it is bonus content once again, and it's all about how colleges use waitlists. And I know we got a whole lot of content, so I think we're going to spread this out a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, I got 2 weeks of this. Waitlists are really important, and I feel like I haven't spoken about them enough in our 146 episodes, and they're confusing. So, for example, Anika, if I would have stopped off at your place at 11:30, of course, I wouldn't have got in the door. But if somebody managed to come out and I gave you a cake or a present, you would say thank you. I hope you would. and thank you is universally meant to mean thank you. I'm appreciative.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is people use the word wait list to mean a bunch of different things. So you don't necessarily know exactly what it means if you're waitlisted. So let me ask you this. When you think of a college waitlisting a student, what do you think that means from their standpoint? Like, what are they saying to you?
Well, they're saying you didn't make it through the first round of acceptance, but you're still on our mind. Let's see how these other kids pan out, and we'll let you know.
Yeah, but you're basically referring to the most commonly understood understanding of a wait list, which is colleges need a backup plan in case they don't meet their enrollment objectives, right? They've got to bring in 5,000 girls, 5,000 boys, and you are an acceptable applicant. Like, we can accept you. You meet our admission standards, or we would deny you, but you're not quite as strong as some others we have here. So, but we don't know how many of them are going to come. So we'll waitlist you and see if we need you or not. Like, that's like the insurance waitlist, right? Is that sounds like what you were describing, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So that's the primary, the number one way that waitlists are used, but it's not the only way by far. Okay. And there's something that's really started to grow about 5 or 7 years ago. And this is the one I want to talk about today. And then next week, I'll get into some other ways waitlists are used. So this is something that I don't know who came up with it, but I have to admit this was slick. So first of all, just to give some background, I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. The way colleges build their brand, the way they increase their stature in the marketplace, one of the most important ways is by increasing their selectivity, because the public, meaning listeners, meaning parents, meaning students, college counselors, everybody, there's a tendency to create a pecking order of colleges out there. Like, these are the best and these ones are not so great and these ones are in the middle. And there's several things that the public uses to determine whether a school is prestigious or whether a school is selective. And the 3 most common ways from my experience that people use, and all of them are used a lot. Well, I'm going to ask you the question. What do you think the 3 are, Nika?
Wait, the 3 most common ways that schools are...
No, the 3 most common ways that the public uses to determine whether or not this is a really good school. There's a fourth. There's a fourth way too. There's 4.
Well, I'm gonna say rankings number 1.
Okay, so rankings. That's one.
Yeah,
what else?
I'll say rankings. Just, I guess, what do you call it? Historical. Just what people. I guess what I'm trying to say is what colleges are known. Like, about the name brand schools. Like,
okay,
I don't know.
So I'm going to call that reputation.
There you
sort
go.
Of
That's
with
the word I'm looking for. Reputation.
Reputation, kind of with like my peers, or if I bounce the name off you know what I mean? If I bounce the name off somebody, whether it's my parents or my peers or whatever, they're like, ooh, that's a good school. Okay, so that's number 2. What do you think the other 2 are?
Unfortunately, I'm going to say cost. I don't know why, but
that's actually a really good guess, but I don't find that's one of the big 4. But that would be a good guess. In general, you'd think the more expensive, the better, right? That's actually a really good guess, but I don't find that to be one of the big 4. But it actually is it would be one. It would just be way down the list. Any idea what the other 2 would be?
Let me see. Why are you considered to be one of the best?
So we've said rankings.
Acceptance
we've
rate.
said
I guess acceptance rates.
Acceptance rates.
Yeah.
Bingo, winner, chicken dinner. That's the one I want to camp out on today.
Okay.
But the other one, the 4th one, is test scores.
Okay.
Average test score. So those are the big 4 from my experience. Like, I'm not ready to survey anything, but I feel very strongly about this because I've been doing this for 21 years. So when people say, and I've had people tell me, like, I judge a school by the test scores. or I judge a school by the acceptance rate, or I judge a school by the rankings, or when I talk to my friends or my parents, they don't think that school's that good or whatever. So I've seen those are the big four. So, and it's important for schools that they build their brand, that they position themselves in the marketplace so that people think they are a very good school. And the reason why that's important, there's two reasons why that's important. One is because if people think your school is very good, they'll be willing to pay more for it. They just will. I can't tell you how many times people tell me, I will pay X amount for this school, but I'm willing to pay way more for that school. So people treat colleges just like they would anything else. If you're buying anything from a car to a TV to staying in a hotel, if they think you're really, really good, they're willing to pay more. So they're constantly trying to build their brand so that people are willing to pay more. The other thing is, this is very important. If they think you're really, really good, then they're more likely to choose you over the competition when you get in. So your yield will be higher, which makes your job that much easier. Okay. So because of that, there's a whole business side behind the scenes of how can I improve my position in the marketplace? How can I reposition my brand so that people are willing to pay more and we don't have to admit 8 kids to get 1. Like when we admit kids, they're so flattered to be admitted by us that they come. So the problem is, well, it's a lot harder to drive your acceptance rate down because you have to admit a certain number of kids to fill your class. So how do you drive your acceptance rate down? What do you think, Anika? How do you do it?
You deny or waitlist, I guess.
So
Maybe.
How does waitlisting drive your acceptance rate down?
Because the kids, what is it? Oh my God, I'm having a brain fart. So the number of people that you don't accept, because you have such a high number of applications, you don't accept all those applications, basically.
Okay, so that's the way it generally works, right? But you have to have the applications in order to waitlist. So
Right.
Here, let me just go into it. I'm asking a lot of questions. Let me just explain to you this new method that really started surfacing 5 to 7 years ago, and it's really growing.
Okay.
If you take an applicant and you just accept them and then they don't come, well, your acceptance rate went up and you didn't build your class. Because remember, they're also have the other goal of building the most gifted and talented, diverse class, pleasing stakeholders in multiple different areas and filling the class. So that they also need to do that, right? So if you just accept somebody and they don't come, then 2 things just happen to you. 1, you never filled one of the slots for the class that you need to fill, and your acceptance rate didn't go down. So this is why, we've talked a little bit before about recruiting to reject and how colleges try to get large numbers of kids so that their acceptance rates can be lower. Somebody came up with a brilliant idea. We can do this through the wait list. Now, here's how the game works. I see a kid and I really want this kid at my school. They meet every possible criteria that we could ever want for accepting. However, we don't think they're LTE, likely to enroll. So if we accept them and they don't come, we didn't help our acceptance rate and we didn't get them. So we'll waitlist the student that we really want to come. And then we'll find out by waitlisting them if they're interested in us. So what happens when you waitlist is a student gets a notice that they need to make a decision whether they want to stay on the waitlist or not. It used to be cards. You get this card and you have to send it back, postage paid, put it in the mail. Now nobody's doing paper anymore, right? It's log into the online portal, log into the website and indicate whether you want to stay on the waitlist or not. So that's very helpful because now this is completely anecdotal. I haven't read a study on this, Anika, but from my experience, about 35 to 40% of people stay on the wait list. The rest don't. Because remember, they're also getting acceptances from other schools at the same time, right? And so if they get an acceptance from someone they like already, or maybe someplace that they had ranked ahead of you in their own mind, then they're like, bump you. You were in my number 4 school. I got in my number 2 school. So I'm not going to stay on the wait list. And that's the reason why schools did it anyway. They never sensed that you were likely to enroll. So they waitlist you. So right away, that helps them. Immediately, bang, 60 to 65% of people choose not to be on the wait list. And those numbers do vary from school to school a lot, depending on the brand name of the school and other factors. So now the next step is you send correspondence to these people on the wait list that, remember, these are people you really wanted to admit. These are not people you had as a backup because they weren't as strong as others. These are people that you really wanted to admit. And maybe they're so strong that you don't normally get kids like this. So you suspect that they're treating you as a backup, but you don't want to waste an acceptance on them. So then what you do is through your correspondence with them, you try to fish out whether or not you think they're really going to come. Now, let me give you actual examples because I think this will make more sense to people. I started working with a new student a couple weeks ago. I think I might have shared this story. I don't know if I did or not. I'm not going to share the state. I'm not going to share a lot of information because share some personal stuff. But they came to me because they had a brother who pretty much took the SAT one time and came a question or two from getting a perfect score. 6 APs, 5s on all of the APs. Okay. Doesn't get into the University of Chicago, where both parents went, Stanford, Columbia, or the University of Washington. They're like, what is going on? So the first thing I said in talking with them was, did you apply to any of these schools early? No, we didn't apply early. Okay. So the University of Chicago is known for this. If you don't apply early action or ED, you pretty much are not going to get in. They had a 1% acceptance rate in Nico, 1% for people that did not apply early action or ED. And then I started explaining to them a little bit about this. And then they explained to me, this makes sense because he got waitlisted at Chicago. And we started getting this weird kind of correspondence. It made it sound like, let us know if you want to come here because we may be able to take you off the wait list. So do you see the game that they're doing?
Yeah.
They're keeping their acceptance rates down so they don't have to waste an acceptance on someone they think is probably unlikely to come. And then they right away find out, do you want to stay on or not stay on? So get rid of other people that don't want to stay on. Then through correspondence, they sort of let you know, like, we might have a spot for you if you really want to be here. So speak up if this is where you really want to go.
Oh, my goodness.
And what happens is if you don't speak up, then they continue to keep you on your wait list. But if you do say, yes, you were my dream school, I'm coming if you admit me, now we flip you to an accept, and we didn't waste an acceptance on someone that doesn't want to come.
That's craziness, but I get it, I guess.
I mean, as bad as this sounds, I know this might make you think I'm crazy. I would actually do this if I was in admissions.
You said you would?
Yeah, I think it's actually really brilliant, to be honest with you, because you really do need to build your brand, and you really will build your brand by keeping your acceptance rate down. And it's not really hurting you if you waitlist a kid that you really want and you give them an opportunity to let me know, if you want to come here, I'm pretty sure we can make it happen. I don't think you're damaging a kid that much by, sure, they never got an acceptance originally, but you're going to flip it into an acceptance. So to me, I see how it helps the institution, and I don't feel like I'm really hurting the kid that badly to do this.
Well, I guess a couple things. So one thing is that this is the first time I've ever seen a wait list from a positive perspective, right? Like, waitlisting has always been, at least from my experience, has been like, oh God, okay, I'm not getting in. So that's one thing. But the second thing is that when you say, okay, well, if they come back to you and say, well, if you want to come on, then we might have a spot for you. And you say, okay, yes, you I love you so much. Is there a narrative piece to that? When you communicate with them to say, yes, I want to come to you, or yes, I want to stay on the waiting list because, like, is that necessary in every time? Because you may not be my favorite. I just want to get off your wait list. So do I have to say that you're my favorite in order to be, to potentially get that spot?
I mean, there's going to vary from school to school, but in most instances, what I'm talking about here, this is very subtle, but I need to know that you plan on coming if I take you off. This happened to another student I worked with in New York, with Case Western Reserve. They just came right out and said it in Ohio. They just clearly communicated and said, we have a spot for you if this is really where you want to come. So if you're not interested, that's okay. But if this is where you really want to come, please speak up because we have a spot for you.
Yeah, but what if you say that and you don't go? Is that some kind of breach of integrity? Like the whole binding agreement?
So yes and no. It is a breach of integrity, but you're not getting thrown in jail. Nobody can do anything about it.
Right.
But why would you do that unless your goal is to just have another trophy on your shelf or put another notch in your belt and be able to brag to your friends that you got in?
But
Like,
that's the thing, though, right? I mean, students do that.
They do, but, it doesn't happen that often because they're pretty coy about the communication. Like, it could be, we'd like to talk to you more if this is where you want to come and maybe we set up a little 10 or 15-minute conversation. I mean, there's different ways this can happen. Now, here's where that can happen. If money is involved and if you're thinking, right, I want to come, but I need a nice package.
Right.
Then you indicate, yeah, I'd like to come if the money's good. And then the money's not good and then you don't come. But one of the other secret things about wait lists, a lot of times when people are going to wait lists, they're looking for people that can pay. A lot of times schools have really used up a lot of their money and now they're looking for people that can pay. Not always, but often. So that takes the money equation out of there, right? If these are people that aren't requesting financial aid. But that's kind of how the game is played. And it's played a lot. It's very common. I see it a lot. And I know as an applicant, it doesn't feel good because you're like, I met the admission standard, accept me. It feels a lot better to get an acceptance.
All right.
But understand what the school's trying to do. They really are trying to protect wasting acceptances on people that don't come. And one way you can kind of know, Anika, that a school is doing this is they go to their wait list early, like April 3rd, April 6th, April 10th. Normally May 1st is sort of the time, right? When you kind of see, oh, gee, we need some more people. So let's go to our wait list. But when you see people waitlisting and then fishing around to see whether you're going to come, like early in April, you know that they're playing that game. So I have a question. Do you think it's bad of me that I could, if I was in admissions, I don't see it as unethical to do this?
Yes. No, I'm just kidding.
Why did I ask that question?
Well, a little bit. I mean, I don't know. I don't work in that world. I mean, I understand business is business. There's bottom line stuff. But so, I mean, honestly, I can't relate because I'm from the student. I'm on the student perspective. Like, just admit me, darn it. If you want me, admit me. So,
I mean, I totally understand how a student doesn't like that. And you feel like you're playing games with me.
Yeah.
I totally
don't care
get
about
that.
your business needs. I just want an acceptance.
But I also, because I did the job, I also know like it's so much easier to do your job if you're very well positioned in the marketplace and people see you as a hot school. It just makes it so much easier for you to get the kids you're trying to get and to improve your school. Like your job ultimately is to improve your school. So this is like one of the underbelly sides. Like a lot of people don't like this. A lot of people think it's controversial. A lot of people probably think that I'm bad for me to admit that I would do this, but I really see how this helps an institution. I really do, because people are looking at those acceptance rates. So the way I'm looking at it is, in the end of the day, if you really wanted to come here, we still admitted you. Yeah, you didn't initially get that acceptance you want. And I know we probably created a little more stress for you by giving you a wait list instead of an acceptance initially. And that didn't feel great. But that's kind of a small price to pay in order for us to properly position ourselves to. It's not just about, when I talk about improving your brand, that sounds really cold and businessy, right? But think about it this way. Here's another way of looking at it. In admissions that the way you make your school better is by hiring amazing faculty, administrators, and bringing in the absolute best students. That's how you make your school better. So I'm going to have a better shot at better students if they hold my school in high regard. So I'm looking at this also as a way of improving my school. And so if I had to inconvenience the student a little bit by they got a wait list at first and I fully flipped it to admission, and if they didn't want to come anyway, I don't feel bad that we didn't accept you if you didn't want to come, because it's not about collecting trophies. Now, do you agree with that part, Anika?
Yeah, I do a little. But here's the thing, though. I don't. Yep. I mean, should we not be giving off the impression that everybody that makes a waiting list, that this is going to be the case for them? It's not like, oh, the school really wants you, that's why you're on the waiting list. Or are you saying that?
No. So not every school does this. These schools that do this, it's much rarer with public schools, by the way. This is much more common with private schools that are either trying to improve their position in the marketplace or stay where they're in the marketplace. I mean, a place like University of Chicago, they literally are trying to become the most selective school in the country. Okay. They're already way up there in the rankings. In the QS World Rankings, they're in the top 5 in the world rankings right now.
So, okay, so if I'm waitlisted at a public school, then I might as well just move on and
No, I didn't say that. Okay. I didn't say that, because first of all, if you're waitlisted, check the data and find out what percentage of kids are waitlisted and what percentage get in off of the waitlist. Yeah. All that is in the common data set.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing you want to do is find those numbers out. Okay. What I'm saying is public schools can waitlist you legitimately as a backup because they may need you. And then depending on how conservative a school is, some schools admit a lot from the waitlist. Some schools admit very few from the waitlist. But most of the time, public schools are using that backup option that we talked about. Like, we may need you, so I don't want to cut you loose and deny you, then we need you. Like, that's legitimate, right? That's like no different than corny illustration number 2. So I'm somebody who doesn't like to have cash on me because I like to, put everything on my credit card and get frequent flyer miles. So I don't like to have cash, but I'm coming here to North Carolina. I figured, okay, let me at least get 2 20s out so I have at least something. So that's kind of like my insurance. My $40 in my pocket is my insurance in case I hit a toll somewhere and they don't take a credit card, or I'm in some backwoods place and they don't take credit cards or whatever. So that's just my insurance money, just in case they don't take a credit card. And so that's kind of like the backup for waitlists, right? It's like your little insurance people in your pocket in case a bunch of these people you admit don't come. So anyway, we talked about 2 methods of waitlist today, the backup plan and using a waitlist to control your admit rate. Okay. Making people show you they're interested, then flipping them from waitlist to accepts. Now, I will tell you this, Anika, there's one thing I do want to say. So I can't have it both ways. So I admit I would do that strategy if I was at a school. Mm-hmm. But here's the problem. I hate that schools do that now that I'm on the college counselor side. No, I do, because what happens is when I'm building a list for somebody and I want the list to be balanced and I have a list of schools that I feel are probables, highly, you have your reaches and your challenge schools and your stretch schools, and then you have your possibles and your probables. The problem is it makes it difficult sometimes to build probables because I think you're likely to get into school, but if a school's playing that game over there on you, then they might turn around and waitlist you. Because one of the times, sometimes they waitlist, if you're so strong that they think you're likely not to go there, that's one reason the school can waitlist you. If they say, look, we normally get kids that have like a 21 on the SAT and a 3-1 or 3-2, and you're applying to us and you have like a 35 ACT and a 1500, we don't normally get kids like you. So, that can be one reason actually to waitlist a kid is that kids with your academic profile rarely pick us. So that makes it hard to build a balanced list because the schools you think that someone's going to get in for sure, they don't get in because the school plays this game. So I have to admit, I'm kind of playing it both ways. Yes, I don't like it as a counselor, but I have to admit I would do it as an admission officer.
Oh, Mark.
At least I'm being honest. Do I get anything for that?
Oh,
I know there's a bunch of our listeners that want to throw something at me because they're all they're all parents and thinking, why would you do that to my kid?
You didn't hear those headphones crashing across the room?
Okay, friends, we've been hearing William Segura now for 4 weeks. This is our final week. We did 3 weeks looking at different ways admission files are read, 3 different models. And then William transitioned to talk about Emory University. And this is our last week. And he wraps up his conversation on understanding Emory University. In this session, Will talks about the Center for Disease Control, which is on Emory's campus. He also talks about who Emory's overlap schools are. Who do they compete with? And why Emory overlaps with some universities as opposed to others. Then Will talks about athletics at Emory. And I close by putting Will on the hot seat. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Will, talk to us about the CDC, because I know the CDC was really birthed on Emory's campus, right? And what's the relationship with Emory and the CDC, and are there any unique opportunities that Emory students have to work with the CDC?
Yeah, so the CDC is located on our campus. It's on the Clifton corridor. And we did a tour of the CDC years ago. I think it was by my second or third year. We did like a little tour, a mini tour. And I'll tell you what, you're not just going to stroll into the CDC. I'll tell you, you're going to be going through some security checks for sure. But students certainly have opportunities to be engaged in research through different programs on campus, some of those being through the CDC. I certainly don't want to promise that that is something you're going to be doing as a first-year student, because it may not be. But there are certainly undergraduate and graduate students that have opportunities to be engaged in the health sciences, the CDC being one of them. And that can be through some of our already kind of pre-established research programs, like our Emory Research Partners program, where students can have an opportunity to be engaged through a structured program. And that can also be through some of our programs with working with our faculty. And so you may be interested in a specific academic area, and the faculty member might have great connections in that space, and they see something in you that really is unique, and they want you to be kind of taking your disciplines and your education to the next level. They might recommend certain conversations with people that they know, right? And so, the CDC is on our campus. Students have an opportunity to be engaged in research, and some of those opportunities could be with the CDC.
Will, talk about your overlap schools. What are your overlap schools? And when students select you over your overlap schools, your cross apps, what are the reasons they tell you they chose Emory?
Yeah, I think this answer's changed over the years, but what I've learned is that it depends on what part of the country you live in. And so an example of that is we find that a lot of our applicants are applying to their flagship public schools. And so, for example, if you live in California, you might apply to your state flagship, and you're also applying to Emory. But at the same time, we also overlap with schools that have major medical centers. And so if you think of places like, just to name a few examples, like Johns Hopkins or Cornell or Columbia, because we have a major medical center on campus. But at the same time, we'll also overlap with universities that are in urban centers. And so think about NYU or UCLA or UChicago. Those are just some examples. And so it's not necessarily attributed to the name of the school as much as it is some of the attributes in the surrounding area of the school that seems to tie us in a lot.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense because, there are a lot of students that say, I want to be in a city. So then all of a sudden you go into a pool of schools that don't want to be in a city. Or like you said, if they're looking for the major medical center, or it could even be warm weather. And then that could probably, lead to overlapping with some warm weather schools. So that was the first part. When they pick Emory over those schools, what are the reasons they tell you?
I think again, what I've noticed, it depends on the values of the student. And so it could be finances, right? Mm-hmm. So a great financial aid package, that could be an answer. That's a very real answer. Mm-hmm. It could be location, right? We talked about the weather, the city. It could be the academic rigor or courses available on campus that's very unique to what they're looking for. It could be family connections or relationships in the city, or much more. And honestly, Mark, you've already talked about it in this call multiple times. That's why people like yourself are so important to the process, right? Because a student might not know what could be a good fit, and you say to them, or they say, well, I'm looking for these, 5 variables. And you say, well, here, based on your experience in this work, you can say, well, here's 10 schools that you should look at immediately. And Emory's on that list for whatever those variables are. And so, I think the reasons they choose is, it depends, but financial aid, location, rigor, the weather, the family. It could just be a lot of different things.
I think that's a great answer and a fair answer. So about to wind down here. Anything about Emory that you have not shared that you just want our listeners to know about?
Well, this is a little sneak peek for our session that'll be in the future, right? The athletics.
Yeah.
I think people forget about our commitment to athletics and the true collection of scholar athletes, student athletes we have on campus. It really is incredible. 27 Division III national championships. That's crazy. Emory has been awarded 116 postgraduate scholarships. And for people who don't know what that is, the NCAA will give out scholarships after a student has graduated for them to pursue postgraduate education. We have the second largest collection of postgraduate scholars in the country, right? And so we really do believe we have an incredible collection of scholar athletes.
I want to talk about your athletic conference too, because it's quite a collection of schools and it really allows a fair amount of travel to different places.
That's right. So we're in the UAA, and so students get to travel. We compete with incredible schools like, University of Chicago, Washington University, University of Rochester, just to name a few, right? I mean, those are just some of the schools in our conference. And so we get an opportunity to compete with a collection of schools that all have the same values academically that we do, really prioritize academics, but also prioritize the athletic experience as well. And so we're fortunate. Thinking of more schools as we're talking, Carnegie Mellon, I mean, the list goes on and on of just incredible schools in our conference. So
Johns Hopkins and NYU, are they both in there?
NYU, I believe you're right. They're in the conference as well.
Yeah, good stuff.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
The recommended resource for episode 146 is a fascinating book called The College Dropout Scandal. The book is written by David Kirp. Let me tell you a little bit about David Kirp. Kirp is a professor at the Goldman School of Public Policy at the University of California, Berkeley. He's a member of the National Academy of Education. He's a contributing writer to the New York Times. He's also a senior scholar at the Learning Policy Institute, which is a think tank. You can read a lot more about the book and David Kirp at davidkirp.com. But what the College Dropout Scandal does is it looks at an extremely important scenario or dilemma or debacle. Why is it that fewer than 60% of college freshmen graduate in 6 years? Why is it that fewer than 40% earn an associate degree in 3 years? He studies this problem in depth. He's been studying it for decades. And he says that we actually have the tools to boost graduation rates. We have the tools to shrink the achievement gap. And he proves this by looking at what some of the most successful schools are that are addressing this issue. No, he doesn't look at the schools like the Harvards and the Swarthmores and Amherst and Pomonas, who are already bringing in 4.0 students who are wealthy and have every imaginable resource in the world. But instead, he looks at places like CUNY in New York, or Long Beach State, or Georgia State. And he looks at the incredible success that they have. He uses on-the-ground reporting, conversations with university administrators, presidents, and accessible overviews of the latest research. And he looks at a range of institutional reforms using big data, identifying at-risk students, looking at behavioral strategies from nudges and mindset changes that have proven to be successful at boosting undergraduate learning and graduation rates. The book is something every college counselor will love and every parent should also read. It's a fantastic read. I can't recommend it highly enough. The book is The College Dropout Scandal by David Kirp, and it's our recommended resource for episode 146. All right. Well, you know this. Nobody gets away being interviewed without going on the hot seat here. That's a tradition. We call it the lightning round, the hot seat. It's more lighthearted. So you ready? I got some quick rapid fire questions in closing for you.
Let's do it.
All right. What is your favorite kind of ethnic food to eat?
So I am Colombian. And so in Colombia, we have a dish in the city of Medellin that's called bandeja paisa, which means dish of someone from Medellin. Paisa is like Paisa, P-A-I-S-A, is a term. It's like an endearment term, more or less, or I don't know what it is, actually. I'm not going to make up words.
I love it.
Paisa just means, it would be like saying you're from the Northeast, or you're from the Southeast, or you're a Yankee, you're a Southerner, or whatever the term may be. Paisa means you're from Medellin. And so I love eating bandeja paisa, which is a dish that's got white rice, flank steak, fried plantains, avocado, a cornmeal arepa, and some pork belly, and some beans. It's incredible. You can get it all across Metro Atlanta and, of course, all over the country, but in Colombia as well. And that's what I love to eat. I love to have that meal.
Love it. If you were not an admissions counselor, what other careers would interest you?
I think I can be a jack of all trades in the sense that I've worked in finance, I've worked in project management. And so the important thing is it has to be working with people. People-centric. It can't be just sitting around not having the person experience, the people experience. And so I think I would probably be someone who would be working with underserved communities and trying to help them kind of achieve the next step, because I myself see that in the experiences that I've had in my life, and that I have found that what's most rewarding for me isn't always what's in my paycheck, but is the experience that I have, the impact I can make in people's lives.
You'd be great either being like an executive director at a CBO or even being director of college counseling at a CBO with that passion. But we're not trying to take you away from Emory there. But
that's the answer to that. I think serving people, I think, is important because I just get so much fulfillment out of that.
What's the best movie you've ever watched?
I'm not a movie buff, and so that's tough. But, so we have a 2-year-old and we've been watching a bunch of movies on Disney Plus, which is great.
So you're going to give me like a 3-year-old movie for a 3-year-old.
So I watched the whole Cars series movie recently with my son in Spanish. About that, so it changed the audio. And I thought that was such a great set of films. But if we were going to go to something a little bit more serious, I love action movies. And so I think the Bourne series, like the Jason Bourne series movies, are always great. And if we're getting more into like different genres, I was on a plane I was on a plane recently before all this, and I watched the movie that came out not too long ago that I thought was so great. I'm going to get this wrong, but I think it's called The Green Book. And it was talking about,
I'm not the biggest movie buff either, but both my other podcast partners are. But I've heard something called The Green Book. I heard you need to.
I know we got to go soon, but it was a movie, and it was a movie about a musician traveling across the Southeast during a time of intense segregation and racism, and talks about his journey about playing in different venues and his connection with his driver who he hired, who is not somebody of color, and their relationship and how it grew. And it's just a beautiful...
I got to check that out.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful movie talking about people and their humanity and relationships and pushing things like race and all these little-sized things that have also come into the mix aside, and really talking about humans and relationships and music, and it's just really well done.
All right, here's one for you. Obviously, you've been on the road traveling, doing recruitment travel. What's your favorite place you've ever gone for recruitment travel?
Well, prior to covering the Fulton County area in Atlanta, I covered South Florida for almost 7 or 8 years. And so I had the opportunity to travel down to Miami and to Fort Lauderdale and to Boca Raton, which are lovely places. They are, but by all means, I wasn't sitting at the beach.
I know all those places. I know all those little towns down there.
I love the community and the personalities there and the food, honestly, and the culture there. But I think I really even loved traveling to Arizona because I traveled to Arizona a good bit. And so in my travels, we have some downtime. And so I got to go to the Grand Canyon and got to check out all that's associated with northern Arizona. And I just really loved it out there. So I thought it was really cool and really interesting, which I know may not sound like the most awesome and appealing thing, but I'm a nature guy, so it was really beautiful.
Yeah. This is a slight variation to that. If you had to live anywhere else in the world, where would you choose to live?
Well, I like the idea of being able to have kind of location flexibility. And so as long as I have internet access, I think that's the most important thing to me. But I probably want to live by the water somewhere.
Mm-hmm. I love water. Love it.
Probably somewhere in the Gulf or somewhere in kind of the Golden Isles, that they call it here in Georgia, which would be like St. Simon's or Hilton Head or somewhere over there. I think all those areas by the water just bring some kind of peace and tranquility and perspective that I can't always get in that.
I live in a subdivision called the Lakes. We have 5 lakes. It's what sold us on living here. It's just, we have a lake view from our front window and it's priceless. So I'm down for that. But I grew up that way, grew up on water. So I can totally relate. Last 2 questions for you, Will. Best book you've read in the last few years?
Best book I've read. So when I was in business school, I had to read a book, or I didn't have to read. I read a book called Design Your Life. And it's a book by 2 designers at the design school at Stanford. And they talk about, it really helps you focus on what your priorities are and understanding what's important to you in your life. And so in designing your life in a way that's centered around those things. And so that was just a really, really great book to give me some perspective on what's important. And I also recently read a book called Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck. And it talks about your perspective when you approach any kind of situation, whether you're having a growth or a fixed mindset. And it reminded me a lot of our applicants and their perspectives, right? And someone might come from a different resource background and how they might view a situation versus somebody else. And so just context. And so it just really kind of helped me have clear perspective on our applicants and our communities and conversations that you have with people, because not everybody's the same. I mean, everybody's so different.
I'll tell you a quick story. I was at a conference in 2008, and Carol Dweck was a keynote.
Oh.
Yeah. And Growth Mindset, the book had come out recently. And a long story short, her and her husband ended up taking me to the airport because we were flying out at a similar kind of time. And we got there early, and I just got to pick her brain for about an hour. And it was like a fantastic kind of one of those conversations that I'll always treasure.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was great. It's amazing where your travels take you.
Wow.
And my last question, best advice to students and parents who are listening.
Yeah, just remember that this is a human process. I just can't emphasize that enough. And so, especially now during COVID-19, and regardless of COVID-19, this admission process is a human process. And I tell all students that regardless of where you go to college, right? Of course, we'd love you to come to Emory. Where you're accepted to college does not define the kind of person that you are, period. And so please do the best you can to enjoy your time as freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors in high school. That time's not coming back. And then when you're in college, enjoy that experience as well. And I would say, as a parent now, I recognize this. Make sure that you take some time and talk to your parents and thank them for the journey that they kind of brought you through in this process, because visiting colleges, talking to counselors, all this stuff is not required. And if you're fortunate enough to be in that position where you're doing those things, it's because your parents are fortunate to have those resources and they love you so much. And so just talk to your parents, thank them, and enjoy this process of being in high school, because, you're going to get into an amazing school and you're going to do great things. I know that for sure.
I love it. I realize I do have one last question.
Okay.
Share the Emory website, and then about your social media. If we've got prospective students interested in Emory, which ones would you kind of recommend that they prioritize?
Yeah, and so the general website to Emory is www.emory.edu.
And that's just EMORY. Mm-hmm.
That's right, EMORY.edu. And then if you're looking for admission-related information, that's www.apply.emory.edu. If you're looking to get social with us, right, then our Instagram accounts are Emory Admission, just like it sounds. And then the university Instagram is Emory University. And so it's cool because the Emory Admission Instagram is not managed by us as staff members. It's managed by students that we give access to. And so we're not controlling the account in any way. We're not censoring the account. So what you're seeing is real students and their real experiences on their journey at Emory. So I just encourage you to check it out. You'll see some really great things.
Yeah, friends, anytime you hear someone say that, then you need to go there, because students are going to absolutely keep it real. So you're going to want that, not that the admission office doesn't, but there's always that little filter. Anyway, this has been absolutely fantastic, Will. I'm most grateful to you for your time. I really appreciate it. And we'll continue to keep in touch, keep doing the great work you're doing. And I'll circle back with you the next 12 to 18 months, and we'll do that athletic one.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for having me today. And thanks to all the listeners for listening. I really appreciate it.
Sounds great.
Next week in the news, proof points. When women studied with women, they persisted. Another article in the Hechinger Report by Jill Barchet. Mark and Anika will discuss, do I need to pay all at once, or do colleges offer payment plans? Our bonus content is going to be part 2 on Mark discussing how colleges use waitlists. And our interview is with Dr. Lisa Ruff on careers in mental health therapy. And we are back to our college spotlights discussing Cornell College in Mount Vernon, Iowa, a special request by Angie.
Yes, Angie from Minnesota sent that in. I'm actually really excited because, one, we haven't done a college spotlight in Iowa. And secondly, Cornell College is a real fascinating, really, really unique school that I look forward to elucidating on and bringing to our audience next week. But for this week, I'm still celebrating that Georgia went blue.
Georgia went blue, baby.
First time in 28 years since
Georgia
Bill Clinton.
I gotta hand it to you, Mark, because for the last 2 years. Mark has been saying, Georgia's going to go blue. Georgia's going to blue. We need a thing. And I used to say, Mark, man, come on. That's right. They'll talk to me after LeBron wins the next championship. Well, LeBron won the next championship. So I owe you 2 chicken dinners, man.
Well, Dave knows.
Because you called it.
Well, it would just upset me throughout the whole election. Democrats said we have 6 priority states. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, which I totally understood. That was the blue wall, and that got flipped. Yeah. And then they said Florida, North Carolina, and Arizona. And I was like, why is Georgia not on that list? Stacey Abrams only lost the governorship by 1.2 percentage points. Yeah. 55,000 votes. That makes no sense. And plus, Dave knows I see North Carolina and Georgia almost like twins. Like, if you're going to include North Carolina, you got to include Georgia. They're very similar in a lot of ways. So he had to hear that from me from 2 years. But
it's impressive, Mark, because when we were growing up, we would never imagine that Sherman's march to Atlanta through Virginia and through North Carolina and through Georgia would ultimately become the future bulwark of the Democratic Party. It's just truly amazing to see how that transformation.
Well, Dave, it's even more recent than that. I mean, Newt Gingrich, this is Cobb County. That's Newt Gingrich territory. Cobb County is now, 15 points more Democrat than it is Republican. That's Newt Gingrich's seat. That's right. That's his turf. So, whatever your political stripes are, it does show that change can happen. It really can happen. It takes time, but change can happen. So, we'll see. We got an interesting 4 years. The country has a lot of problems right now. Coronavirus is 122,000 cases, Dave, yesterday.
Yes.
122,000 cases. And I know they've gotten better with the medications at preventing deaths, but we're still seeing hitting 1,000 deaths a day.
Yes, I just called a couple days back from some hospitals in New Jersey to see if I wanted to come back and be on their coronavirus medical team. But I got to admit that I'm sticking with the Virgin Islands.
Yeah, the Virgin Islands, they got you. I know what the answer to that was. You should see, they hooked Dave up in this nice apartment. I talked to him. He shows me his water view. And then he says to me, it rains. When it rains a lot, they either let me leave early or we don't work. Or they don't come in. He's chilling, watching TV, getting paid because it rains. Like, this is not the way you described Connecticut to me, where you barely could breathe. They worked you like a slave there.
Yeah, well, it's a genetic thing. Going back to the islands. What can I say, man?
Awesome. Okay. All right, my friend. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. Your College Bound Kid is produced by Dave Vasaya of podcastengineers.com. If you find this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that can really use this information. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Our image editor is Tauha Khan. Webmaster is Stalianos Dimitru. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. And if you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340. And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like to ask us, and we'll include them on the show, you can just email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions. So send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.